What's going on, y'all? My name is Tommy. Welcome back to the channel. Time for another episode of Min-Maxing for Fun and Profit in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Today, I, a child of the 90s, a child of Final Fantasy VIII, saw there were combination weapons in Guns and Gears, and so I could build a gunbreaker. And so that's exactly what we did. If you're liking what you're seeing, remember to like, subscribe, ding the bell. Don't punch your $400 microphone. And stay caught up on all your cool stuff. Remember, Patreon at any tier gets you access to a Google Sheet where this build and other builds like it are thrown together for your convenience. And at higher tiers, hey, if you want to go to magic school with your gun sword and learn how to also do magic in that strange cornucopia of classes, well, I'm running Strength of Thousands twice in a given week starting next week. So I think we can make that happen. But let's dive in. First things first, let's look at the thing we're building around. The gun sword. Half gun, half sword, theoretically stronger than both. It's a combination weapon, which is new as of Guns and Gears. There's a whole bunch of them. I chose this one specifically because, well, gunbreakers, right? The weapon has a firearm form and a melee weapon form, and two separate statistics for each. Switching between the melee weapon and the firearm usage is an interact action to shift your grip, essentially. Except if your last action was a melee strike, you can make a firearm strike with the combo weapon against that foe without fully switching. If you played Final Fantasy VIII, it's press R1 when Squall hits and you would shoot. The combo weapon shares fundamental runes. Property runes only interact based on what qualifies and what doesn't. So the sword can be Vorpal, but the bullet can't be. And we can't put a bayonet or reinforced stock on our sword, oh no. The gun half of our blade has the concussive trait, which says it uses the weaker of the target's resistance or immunity to piercing or bludgeoning, depending on how the bullet interacts. And the kickback trait, which does 1 additional damage with all attacks. You have a -2 circumstance penalty to your attack roll unless you have 14 or more strength, or attach your sword to a bipod. But again, we're trying to cut people with our sword, so we're gonna be relatively swole. The sword is ostensibly a long sword that you are two-handing but not getting two-handed value out of. Versatile piercing, and what I think is the most fun, the critical fusion trait. It gives you 2 additional options for critical specializations when you use the combo weapon. First of which, you can use the crit specialization for the firearm instead of the melee weapon by make a gun go bang when you cut someone. Or, the one I'm vibing with the most, you can choose to discharge the firearm to increase the crit's momentum, or shoot the dude after you stab the dude, and deal 2 additional damage per weapon die. Both of these options obviously discharge your firearm, but the more weapon dice you get, obviously, the harder that is going to hit. 2 extra damage per die adds up real fast. Now, okay, I'm sure a lot of us were expecting a Gunslinger video first. It's not us today. Unfortunately, the gun sword is split across 2 weapon groups, firearm and sword. I want to be as good as possible with both options. There are some Ancestry feat things we could do with either the Gnome Amalgam Musket or the 3-peaked tree. Ultimately, not us today. Gunslingers just don't get as good with weapons that aren't firearms without special niche cases. Thus, today we're looking at the fighter. Fortunately, you don't have to jump through any hoops in 2nd edition to get firearm proficiency. It should be easy enough for you to get your hands on this martial weapon. This build is also going to be mad as all heck. It's rare that I make them, but we're going to need both strength and dexterity to function because we both want to cut someone and shoot someone, while also having the ability to not die to the cutting and shooting that certainly will come back at us, not be hit by bad spells, things of that nature. The workaround for that, and I think the workaround in general, for very mad builds is to play any of the Ancestries in 2nd edition that do not have a stat nig, because you could just assign that freebie somewhere and generally come out alright. And since we really like having lots of HP cutting people and having combat options, I think the Hold Scarred Orc will be our choice today. For the background, because I'm basically only choosing rare backgrounds at this point from Guns and Gears, saved by clockwork. You ostensibly are Iron Man. It gives us an ability boost to strength, which is useful for the cutting people part of our build. Gets us trained in crafting, which I think will be a very big hallmark of our build as we go forward. Get the formula for black powder if you're going to be very far from shops or you think your GM is going to hose you. Each day you need to wind yourself up for 10 minutes. The monk is doing yoga, it's fine, just do it then. You also get a +2 circumstance bonus to initiative rolls over it. So for our starting ability scores, all things together, we're looking at a strength of 18, a dex of 16, a Constitution of 12, an Intelligence of 12, a Wisdom of 10, a Charisma of 10. That low wisdom is really, really scary, but again, if we need black powder to function, being good at crafting and grabbing the appropriate crafting feats to make it, it just seems so relevant for us, unless you happen to have an alchemist or other friend in the party who can whip it up for you. Going free archetype on this one now that we're not in playtest mode. 2 archetypes in total on this build. Of course, one of them is going to be Gunslinger. You knew you'd see it. We are, in fact, slinging gun. We're just also slinging blade, which is relevant for what we do. Going to be a little bit of Barbarian in here as well because, well, we like to hit things with a sword. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's talk our class feats. Point blank shot out the gate. For 1 action, it's a stance. When using a ranged volley weapon, where not a thing happens, hooray. When using a ranged weapon that does not have the volley trait, you gain a +2 circumstance bonus to damage rolls on attacks against targets within the first range increment of the gun sword, which is 50 feet. Stacks real nice with the untyped from kickback. I'm presuming most of the shots you make with this thing are going to be at point blank range after you've just stabbed a dude. But in the grand scheme of many dungeons, 50 feet, not that much. This is just kind of extra icing on the cake, given that we don't exactly have a propulsive gun. Power attack at level 2. For 2 actions, make a melee strike. It counts as 2 attacks on the map. If the strike hits, you deal an extra die of weapon damage, which is good on its own even before critical fusion, and a staple feat, I feel like, for a reason. Parting shot at level 4, again, for 2 actions. Assuming you've switched to the gun variant of gun sword, someone gets up in your face, you don't want to spend the action to interact to switch because you're afraid someone's going to deck you over it. You step back and then make a ranged strike with the required weapon. Your target is flat-footed against this. As we progress, you will want your best weapon proficiencies to go into the firearm group, as your dex is going to be a little bit lower for most of the game. I feel like having legendary firearm proficiency and master sword proficiency, but a higher strength balances out in a pretty meaningful way. Furious focus as soon as we qualify for it, so our big angry swing only counts as 1 for the map if we'd like to then shoot them in the face or possibly even swing again. The Barbarian dedication comes next on this side of the feats at level 8, followed by Instinct ability. We'll be choosing the Dragon Instinct. Now suddenly our gun sword does extra elemental damage, riddle me that. Mostly just here to stack on the extra value from it and have access to another thing later. And now that we're past level 10, we get all the real fun stuff from the fighter that I haven't really got a chance to play around with yet. Brutal Finish for 1 action. Make a strike with the required weapon. After the strike, your turn ends. This has the press trait. Presumably, you power attacked before this. The strike deals 1 extra weapon damage die, or 2 if you're at least 18th. If you fail, you'll deal damage equal to 1d8, essentially, for us. And then right after that, Desperate Finisher. When you complete the last action on your turn, and your turn has not ended yet, if you meet the requirements to use an action with the press trait, you use a single action with the press trait as part of the reaction. You forego the ability to use reactions until the start of your next turn, but could let you theoretically brutal finish again. Because why would you not, right after this overwhelming blow, for 3 actions, make a strike? It counts as 3 for the map. If the strike hits, you crit them. If you roll a crit, oops, there's a deadly d12 on top of that. You become stunned 1 and are flat-footed next. This is definitely the we need to close the combat out right goddamn now. And if you've made it this far, if you've made it to level 16, I imagine a lot of encounters, you're kind of just walking up and molly-whopping people to death. Then Savage Critical for a keen weapon. Then the feat that makes my brain hurt, Sever Space. For 2 actions, you destroy the space between you and your targets, thanks Ruby Phoenix, allowing you to strike with your melee weapons up to 80 feet, and then you rush forward as the world struggles to fill the space you just rent in it. My brain hurts. Which brings you and the target adjacent to each other. Either the target is teleported adjacent to you, or you are teleported adjacent to them. If you choose the target, they can fort save against your class DC. You didn't know you were playing Scorpion, but I suppose if you survive the Ruby Phoenix tournament, it's a fair enough moniker. On the archetype side, at level 2, a Gunslinger dedication, as you might have imagined, will be the way of the Vanguard, the way of the two-handed gun, essentially. Followed up immediately by defensive armaments. Any two-handed firearms and two-handed crossbows you wield gain the parry trait, which is not overly exciting. I very much doubt we will be ever parrying with our gun, but it rolls together real nice with Slinger's readiness and the initial deed of the Vanguard, living fortification. When you roll initiative as a free action, you interact to presumably draw the gun variant of your gun sword, and then get a +1 circumstance bonus to AC until the start of your first turn, or a +2 if the chosen weapon has the parry trait, because it literally does, because we literally just put the parry trait on it. We don't have as much con as I would like, and maybe this is my own bias, but I'm imagining the big dude with the sword that goes boom is probably going to get attacked a lot in melee, so the buff to AC without a shield, especially lower on, seems just so vital. Next, we'll take running reload to stride, step, or sneak, then interact to put a bullet in our sword, followed by practiced reloads to get the slinger's reload for our way, that is to say clear a path. For one action, make an athletics check to shove an opponent within your reach using your weapon, then put a bullet in your sword. For the shove, you don't need a free hand, you add the item bonus to attack rolls to the athletics check. If your last action was to shoot someone with your sword, use the same map as that strike for the shove. It still counts towards the map, but presumably you can clear a little bit of room and or yeet someone off the side of a cliff. Speaking of, next we will take Phalanx Breaker for 2 actions. Make a ranged strike against a target within 50 feet of us. The target is pushed directly back 10 feet, 20 feet on a critical hit, and if they get yoked into an obstacle, the target takes bludgeoning damage equal to half your level. But this is an auto pushback. All you have to do is hit, and 2 squares back go a thing. Not only is there obvious synergy from throwing someone into a wall, throwing someone into fire, throwing someone into a wall of fire, I suppose. If they're moving through difficult terrain, you could theoretically throw them back what is more or less 40 feet if you crit them, giving space for your allies, giving space for your wizard to cast at the what's an on-level creature. Wyvern, I think, that has flown down to try to eat them. The flavor's real weird, because I feel like oftentimes we're not shooting at the center of a big group of, like, dudes coming at us. Even then, if we knocked a hole in the center and then moved in, we would just be flanked and died. But I'm rambling, this feat's real good. I think what I would use against the proverbial phalanx coming after us, next up, Dragon's Rage Breath. For 2 actions, if you haven't used this ability since you last got Angie, you exhale a breath of whatever element in whatever shape, dealing 1d6 damage per level on a basic reflex save. Because, in fact, sometimes what is best in life is to cook your enemies, see them driven before you, and then shoot them with your longsword. Maybe even with Stab and Blast, our next feat. For 1 action, if you are wielding a firearm with a detached bayonet, a reinforced stock, a fire lance, or a combination weapon, make a melee strike with our weapon. If the strike is successful, you can immediately make a ranged strike against the same target with a +2 circumstance to the attack roll. It's +2 on the map, but you don't apply the map until after. It's kind of like our very late on for us double slice. And again, 2 for 1's real good. As a reaction next, Grit and Tenacity. If you fail a fort or will save, the latter we're probably much more likely to fail against. You can reroll with a +2 circumstance bonus, because we in fact are not halflings. Lastly, on the archetype feat side, another reaction, Deflecting Shot. If an ally within 50 feet of you is hit by an attack and you can see the attacker, you go bang with sword. Your ally gains a +2 circumstance bonus to their AC against the triggering attack, which you can use after the roll to know if it would be effective or not. For the skill feats, they are mostly up to you. Again, being able to craft black powder and or ammunition, being able to be real good at pushing people around. Damn vital for the things we're doing, but you will know better than me whether or not you need catfall versus, like, stealth things. For the Ancestry feats, Orc Ferocity out the gate to avoid going down when someone hears a very loud noise, is very confused about your weapon, and does what humanoids are unfortunately sometimes want to do when they're confused about something, try to murder it. Then Defy Death to stack real nice with Toughness. Undying Ferocity to get temp HP equal to our level when we pop Ferocity. Incredible Ferocity to be more ferocious more often. Wow, so incredible. Then Rampaging Ferocity as a free action when you fire off Orc Ferocity. Swing your sword. At this point, Mr. Before Too Long, I'm legendary at all things fighting. I'm guessing you probably bring someone down, and therefore you do not burn a use of Orc Ferocity. Our heritage gives us Die Hard for free. So for the general feats, we'll take Toughness first, then Prescient Planner X Prescient Consumable, because, you know, you might need to pull random bullets out of your backpack that you forgot you bought at some point. Then Numb to Death, because when you have room for it, it's fun to take it, and extra HP when you're dying, plus the ability to sidestep the wounded condition. Pretty darn strong. Then Canny Acumen lastly for our will save. Fortunately, it's a little harder to get just straight up dominated in this game, but nevertheless, you don't want to get real angry at your friends because a wizard said so and then stab shoot them. That would be bad. For our key items today, obviously, there are a lot of fun runes we can slap on things. It dawns on me there is no interaction with the Grievous rune and firearms. Hopefully that gets changed at some point. But there are some really cool bullets for the things we can do. Bonus points, GM. If your player really likes a certain kind of arrow, crossbow bolt, or sling bullet, but there's not a bullet variant, I feel like it's more than fair to just let these play universally. Again, real good at crafting, so if you need to roll something to justify it, that also seems fair. But eroding bullet. I'm pretty sure we're wearing gloves at all times because we're big smart, and so we don't really need to worry about the 1 point of acid damage thing. But after we activate the bullet, upon striking our enemy, the glass casing bursts, and we do 2d6 persistent acid damage. Real good against things with acid vulnerabilities, real good at things we want to do damage at, which is a lot of things. Once we have a little more money, transposition ammunition, say that 10 times fast for 2 actions. When you activate the ammunition, instead of shooting someone, you shoot a square. You succeed without making an attack roll and yeet yourself through the astral plane to land in the square where you shot. The greater variant eventually lets you take 2 additional willing creatures. I guess if we're rending space with our sword, we can also move ourselves through space with our gun. But for real, this is pretty darn good. If you can see a platform that you don't want to climb the ladder, or there maybe isn't a ladder, you just and then up you go. Fastest elevator in the West. The impactful rune gives us an additional 1d6 force damage on a successful strike, and on a critical hit you can sometimes yeet people around. And from there it's rather, are you worried about creatures vulnerable to fire? Grab flaming. Do you want to have a chainsaw sword gun? Serrating it is. There are so many runes out now with like Grand Bazaar and Secrets of Magic. It's hard to say which one is strictly the best. Flavor to taste, you'll know what you want, you'll know what you need, which is mostly to be a really good, really modal martial. It's not often that you can just easily pivot over from being a melee fighter to a ranged fighter without losing a whole lot of value in the process. Perhaps that's one of the things I like the most about 2nd edition, is the feat investment works a little different. So like if my 1E fighter who had the dex for it picked up a bow, but didn't have 1, 2, 3, 4 feats, they would be really bad at it, right? In this case, not so much. We also get to choose a weapon that has a very powerful yes hand on the end of our strike in the form, again, of the critical fusion trait. I very much envision walk up, swing the sword, cut someone, have lots of Angie rage, and then pull the trigger, something died. But the only way to figure that out is to put it on the table, isn't it? That's all the time I have for this one. What do y'all think? Are we vibing with combination weapons so far? Let me know down in the comments. Next week, man, there's so much stuff in all these books. I don't know. I have no idea. Do I want to Starlit span with a backpack ballista? I don't know if you can. I haven't read it enough. Do I want to do weird inventor things? We'll figure it out between here and there. Maybe this is a good time to point out that patronage at any tier lets your requests for builds cut to the front of the line because, God, I need some direction. But till then, we'll see you next time.